So let's start by just doing the usual. What's the usual? I'm so afraid I'm going to leave and nobody's going to remember anything I've ever said. Arriving, that's a good start. And what do we mean by arriving? What has to arrive? And the body is helpful, you know. If you don't have one, that's okay. You're welcome. But it's a two-parter. So so we know our bodies are here. We really want to check to make sure our mind has joined us and that it's not thinking about what we were doing in the past. It's not caught up with what you're going to do later. It's present here, because you took time out of your valuable lives to be here. So you might as well use it well. And if you don't want to be here, you don't have to stay here. It's kind of like that. So this is, about choices. So you want to take whatever reason you decided to show up. And based on that reason, set an intention to use your time well to serve that reason, so whatever it is. And then what else do we want to bring with us? I always ask the hardest questions. Set an intention, but we've just talked about a little bit about that, setting the intention by you making, to use this time well. But what do we want to add to that? That we want to do it for the benefit of others. So we always want to try to bring that to mind, that we don't just do this for ourselves, but we do this because we're a part of, a big group of sentient beings, you just think of people, it's a huge group. If you think of everything else along with people, like insects and fish and, pets and whatever, I can't even imagine how many more. So,
is it okay to have a certain person that you are?
In fact, it's the best reason. When we talk about, because we tend to say, so we set our intention to use our time well, and then we add, the wish that it be of benefit for all sentient beings, or however we form it. But it is essential that we think of real people when we do that, people that we know. Otherwise, it becomes just words. So we want to, hey, Gisela. So we want to make sure we do bring to mind. That's why we start with making sure we're present, our body and our mind. And then we try to bring people that we care about to mind in order to make this idea of doing things for the benefit of others, real for us, so it can come from a heart place, not just from, blah, blah, blah place. So set your intention. Remember the reason you showed up. And you might even want to pat yourself on the back for showing up. It may not have been easy for you to show up, but you had made a decision to come, you followed through, and you're here. Yay. And we just want to relax our minds into an open place where you're open to listening, no agreeing necessary. You bring your wisdom with you. You can listen with wisdom. And then we have that wish that it benefit that we wish that it benefit not just our own minds, but it ripples out to benefit those around us. I'll start by reciting the four immeasurables. It's on page 34, I think. The four immeasurables are the mind of love, the mind of compassion, the mind of joy, and the mind of equanimity. May all sentient beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And we'll go to the refuge prayer on page 98. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. That's it. Who's helping us today? Can y'all hear me fine at home? Yay. All righty. Okay, so as usual, folks at home, if you have a question or whatever, just unmute yourself and speak out. Okay, otherwise, I might miss the fact that you want to ask a question. So have you found your mind? How's it doing? Yeah.
Sometimes friend, sometimes foe.
Sometimes friends. Yes. My case always confused. Oh, okay. So just to traditionally, you give the background of where you got the teachings from. So I got this teaching from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama got it from. So Nagarjuna apparently gave this teachings to Atisha. Atisha brought the teachings to Tibet. Atisha taught Drontampa, and Drontampa taught Patawa. And these are names as you start to read all these texts, you'll start becoming familiar with, believe it or not. To Sharwawa Yodendrak to Geshe Chikawa. Okay. Horton Numkel Pell wrote Rays of the Sun. That's another great book, Rays of the Sun. We studied that, the basic program or somewhere. I've studied it somewhere. It was a disciple of Lama Tsongkhapa. Horton Namgyel Pell taught it to the first Dalai Lama. Kyabje Ling Rinpoche Sr. taught it to the current Dalai Lama. So there you go. So that's called making sure your lineage is valid. You want to be able to know that the teachings came from legitimate sources. And of course, for most of us, we don't know what we're doing. And we look it up and we go, we still don't know what we're doing. So it takes a while to have confidence. So it's always a good idea to look for the teachers of your teachers, and to, see what they recommend and all that kind of stuff. So that's a pretty safe way to go about it. So, and often people will ask me about like Tibetan teachers and other centers or other traditions, and ask me, and I won't know because I'm not familiar with that tradition or that school of Tibetan Buddhism. And so you'll have to do your own research into that, looking into it. Occasionally, I'll be familiar, but in general, my education's all been in the Galupa tradition, you know, and it's the only thing I've been exposed to, really. Some people, you know, came from a kind of really wild roundabout way, you know, and did lots of retreats in the 70s and 80s and, you know, and 90s and did all sorts of things. And so they're familiar with all sorts of, I did not do that. You know, I walked into a Tibetan Buddhist center in Raleigh, North Carolina. That surprised anybody else, you know, but, you know, there it was, Tibetan Buddhist center, looking for places to meditate.
Walked into a center in Deerfield Beach, Florida.
Yeah, I know. And when I tell people that, I go, I teach at a center in Deerfield Beach, Florida. You know, I'm like, can you believe it? I don't know why that seems strange to me. But Raleigh particularly is very Southern, and it just surprises me. So, which is just my ignorance, nobody else's, you know. But so, and my first teaching was on compassion. You know, I was there for I think a week, and a teacher came in and taught on compassion. I was just hooked. That was that. So I never went elsewhere after that. You know, I had dabbled with Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings before that, but I mean, you know, this, you know, this is all she wrote. So, and I went to Australia and studied with teachers there for a long time, and all in this tradition. Or a short story getting very long. So anyway. So,
Question.
yes,
So there
please.
were only 2 Dalai Lamas so far?
They're 14. He's the 14th Dalai Lama. Yeah. And Trump, in his first term of office, made it that the Chinese could not pick the next Dalai Lama. Made a law about it.
Did you say that again?
China and Tibet, they don't get along. Okay. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama is not allowed to go to Tibet. Has been allowed since he went into exile in 1959. And so one of the traditions in the Tibetan tradition is that when a teacher dies, they look for the reincarnation of that teacher, you know, so which is what they've done with the Dalai Lamas. But there's always this danger that the Chinese government will decide who's the next Dalai Lama. And they did that with the Panchen Lama. And, you know, so the Panchen Lama that was recognized by His Holiness hasn't been seen for, I don't know how many years, 40 years, 50 years, long time.
A child.
And China, yeah, and China appointed their own Panchen Lama. So there's a fear that will happen with the Dalai Lama. And so it comes up for discussion. But, you know, sometimes His Holiness will say he's not sure they'll, you know, be a known reincarnation, you know, kind of thing. But not to worry, you know, if it will be used for to benefit sentient beings, he'll show up. So, and if it won't, he won't show up. You know, if it will cause conflict and more problems, you know, so.
Any idea of the Dalai Lama's words, more or less, that it is choosing not to reincarnate? Something to that effect?
That's what I just said.
Yeah.
So.
So what is that Trump said again?
What?
What is that he said again, that the Chinese could not?
I don't know exactly the wording, but it's something like that we would not accept the Chinese appointment of the Dalai Lama. That only, so whatever. I mean, it has no weight in law, obviously. You know, but it's an international statement, kind of like we won't accept if the Chinese government appoints.
Is Panchen Lama who looks the next Dalai Lama? Isn't he head the search?
I don't know.
Oh.
Obviously, that won't happen this time. I don't think so. I think it's people like the regents.
That's why I asked, because they.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah, I'm not a scholar of Tibetan history or anything to do with it. I'm not even attracted to Tibetan history. I was attracted to the Buddha's teachings, and that's pretty much it. So I'm never was a good history student. So in general, even though I read these things, I can't recall them, so because it's just not my area of concern. So, but I just trust that, His Holiness will make an appropriate decision, whatever it might be. So, okay, so the first verse of the 8 verses of Training the Mind is determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. I shall hold them most dear at all times. I needed more information. It's like, it sounds good, but how do you do that? How do you hold them most dear at all times? Why are they the more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel? What does it mean? And so this is why I turned to this other text, because the 8 verses I find a little too concise, So the 7-point mind training actually is like kind of sets you up for the whole practice. It tells you what the preliminary practices are, which are, how you set up for your morning meditation every day, where you clean the room, and then you set up your altar and make offerings, so it's very, then you sit in your 7-point posture, and you generate a virtuous motivation. Then you make requests to the merit field of all the teachers. Those are these guys. These are the teachers in this tradition. You recite the 7-limb prayer, and then you make requests to all the lineage lamas. And so the long prayers about all of these things. Okay. So that tells you something about before you sit down to meditate, or the things, that. So what would that be about? The preliminary practices of cleaning the room and setting up your altar and whatever else I said.
Presence. You feel more calm and present in that moment.
That's certainly one aspect of it. By doing these rituals, you are kind of setting your mind up. This is my time to practice, It's also about creating merit in your mind stream. It's about this idea that you are turning to people that you hold as valid teachers of what to do in order to take care of your mind. So petitioning the merit field or whatever, making requests, saying the 7-limb prayer, these are, ways in which to bring you closer to the enlightened beings that are already there, because enlightened minds are everywhere. But we have no sense of that because we're ordinary beings, until we're like high bodhisattvas, we won't have any sense of that. Yeah.
And also like creating a connection with these teachers for the upcoming
For the next
life.
time around. Yeah. Yes.
Next cycle.
Yeah. So we want to have karmic connections to, so there are all sorts of things, like you're not supposed to disparage the images of Buddhas or any of the bodhisattvas, or, so you may see something and go, wow, the artwork on that's really terrible. And that's fine, but you never say the Buddha is terrible. The artwork might not be so great, and I wouldn't even recommend criticizing it. But it's, you just don't go there. But, it's, and this again is about drawing our mind towards what we are attracted to, so that we will, when we walk into a bookstore, pull off a book that's Buddhist. Or we'll see a picture, an image, and go, oh, that's interesting, from life to life to life to life. I mean, so it's just, And I know that it worked for me because there's absolutely no reason why I bumped into Buddhism or Tibetan Buddhism. I was not a spiritual seeker at all, but clearly something ripened for me. So go figure. So, and then making offerings. Again, this is about saying, if you were to invite the Buddha and, his guest to your home, how would you treat it? Well, you might put get some flowers in. You would make sure you have something good to drink. You would make sure that whatever he needed, back in the days of the Buddha, they would provide washing water for the feet because, the dusty roads and all that kind of stuff. You might give them something to eat. You would get, fragrance the air with incense or whatever, that kind of thing. You might even offer them to have their feet massaged with fragrant oils, So, it's just sort of like, and so this was the traditional offerings in India at the time. And so that's what we represent on our altar with the water bowls or these kinds of things, and music, be music. So, and all of this is just about just what you said, getting our mind ready to meditate. It's like, so if you do this daily, you just go into that mode, Now that doesn't mean, you really do want to try to get your mind also in the right place, because I'm perfectly capable of setting up an altar going, because I don't like what I have to do later that day. Not a good way to go, but, so you have to, it takes effort. It's not just that, oh, doing this will magically make you this, if you realize it's not magically this, then you have to turn your mind towards, having the right attitude. So, so why would we value this practice? Helps bring the Dharma in the moment. Well, what do you have to do to value this practice?
You have to feel that it's beneficial for you.
Yeah. So what does that mean?
You make the
It's going
time.
to help you, help other people.
So you have to
Move
have
around.
done it. So in the very beginning, it isn't going to have any, you're going to, you first have to, you're investigating whether this has any benefit for you. So when we're beginning, we want to, take care to notice is anything happening? If a month from now, do I feel better, just mentally better, clearer, less stressed, whatever. I mean, so one of the things we want to do when we're investigating the teachings is first, question the teachings, look at our lives, but we also want to try out the tools, because we can't know if like meditation works unless we do it. Drat. Anyway, so, and we can't know what setting up water bowls might do for us unless we do it, all those kinds of things. So, and we also want to notice what's going on. So first you notice your mind and how you're in your body, how things are feeling in your body. And then you notice if anything changes.
You have to know like how many bowls to set out, if it's your own little altar that you're doing, or kind of flowers or kind of foods, or I mean, is there any rules about that?
They're suggestions. They're list for everything in Buddhism. You can look at any index in any book, and it will go the 8 this, the 6 this, the 3 this,
really?
and there are lots of 3s. And then the 4s of this, 4s of that. There's a little booklet, I don't know if we have any at the moment, called A Daily Practice to Shakyamuni Buddha. Explains all of it. It's all on the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive website. It's all on the FPMT website somewhere. These are not hard to find. Yeah, okay, so there you go. So it's all over the place. So it's not hard to find out, for one thing. And then there are classes, okay, if you just take Discovering Buddhism, those classes are offered. There's one of them's all about that.
So if I just want to set out some water and food and flowers and.
You can do that.
And, yeah, okay, you can do that.
Yeah.
There's no harm in doing.
No, there's never a harm in offering. So the reason they use water bowls in Tibet is when a teacher brought the teaching to Tibet, he goes, "Oh, the water here is so wonderful. It's not going to cause any digestive problems," because the rivers in Tibet are what ends up in India, and what happens in those rivers between one country and another, they get polluted. So it goes to Tibet where the sources of the rivers are, and it's all very clear and wonderful. And so there are 8 good qualities of water. Which don't ask me to recite them because I don't know, but they taste good. It tastes good. It's refreshing. It doesn't cause stomach upset, these different things. So that's one version of all of offerings, and it doesn't cost anything. At least at the time, it didn't cost it. Now we pay for water, but that's probably a good thing to do. So. We also offer the first part of our food or drink. When we before we eat, we try to remember to offer it to all the teachers and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and then all the other sentient beings who may need it, kind of thing. These are all about developing mental habits of, respect for the teachers and the teachings, particularly for the teachings. Where was I going with that? Generosity and patience. Some of us don't even have the patience to set up an altar. And I'm not saying that critically. I know this personally. I think we're just like, oh, not today. You get over it eventually. Yeah.
What about placing Christian symbolism?
That's up to you. But if you're, it's just entirely up to you. It's a lot of people I know do that, but when you go for refuge, you might have to decide what you're going to refuge for. And it's usually some qualities, and those are shared pretty much by all spiritual leaders in all traditions. So you don't have to, like, to me, Jesus Christ is like the perfect example in history of a bodhisattva who was willing to suffer greatly and without understanding, for the benefit of everybody else. So it's fine. So it is about your refuge, and so whatever your tradition is, whoever you take refuge in, these are good habits to have of just reflecting and appreciating them, and whether you use symbolism like making gifts to the altar or not. So you don't put your Christmas wish list online.
Other people's wishes.
Or yes, you could put other people's wish list on the altar. Yes. So what are the other preliminaries? So that's just getting kind of set up. So then the first thing to meditate on is death and impermanence. Aren't we thrilled? Okay. Why?
Reminds us to practice right now or to value the time we have.
Because it runs out. To remember that we want to use our time well because it runs out. So we don't want to get caught by stuff that is meaningless to us. There's much we have to do that's probably meaningless to us. I don't really find any great meaning in scrubbing the tub or the toilet or, even the kitchen sink, but it has value. We have to do it. There's a reason why we do it. So it's, but we want to recognize that sitting down to do your spiritual practice has value, and we want to remember what that is, because we run out of time. And we are free to do the practice. There are a lot of places where you're not free to do your practices. You're not free to practice your spiritual path. Tibet's become one of those places that, from every now and then, they're not allowed to practice. And every now and, they all go to prison and and then it changes. So it's they don't really have the freedom in Tibet now. They're told what they can do in the mind because they become tourist attractions, at the different monasteries, but it's quite regimented about what they do. They're not able to just freely practice their tradition. So we want to rejoice in the fact that we have that freedom right now, and that can it. We don't want to take these things for granted. We're very, very fortunate that we have these opportunities, and it's all a matter of degree, it's just not even. There's no, equity around the world with respect to this. We also want to, because what helps us when we remember that we want to, to me, what I like to think about is if, on my deathbed, what would I want to remember about my life? Would it be my mystery novels, or would it be, the movies I watched, or whatever? I mean, or would it be my relationships with people, or what it would be, so we want to choose how we spend our time, because at the end of our lives, it will matter to us how we spend our time. And that mind at the time of death is what is the condition for the ripening of a seed for our future life. So it's really good to feel, not tons of regret, but just, okay, good enough. I did good enough. I'm looking forward to the next adventure to benefit others, and just to keep it going.
About death, I have a question.
Yeah.
How did the Buddhist teachings accept a suicide, the choice of dying?
It's not a good idea. Why might it not be a good idea? And just from a Buddhist teaching kind of perspective.
Because you still might have more to learn.
You're killing yourself.
Harming is.
You're harming something. You're harming a sentient being who could become enlightened, and so that's just a non-virtue.
You still work out some of your karma.
But not just work it out. We're not here to learn. We are here because of the effects of our action. Okay, so it's cause and effect. So if you kill yourself, what's the effect of that, according to Buddhism?
A negative karmic seed.
Maybe.
It's also violence.
Huh?
It's also violence.
Violence.
Maybe not though.
You
Killing is violent.
you give up an opportunity.
Well, you're ending your opportunity in this life to keep creating causes.
Starting a
Do you end? Consciousness goes on. It's not going to help you at all in terms of, oh, good, now I don't have to deal with, life. Wrong. So the only good thing about suicide, as opposed to killing someone else, is that you can't have a complete cause of killing if you kill yourself, because you can't die before you do. That even makes any sense. If you kill someone else and they die before you do, you get a complete act of karma. If you're in a duel and you both get shot and you die first, you don't get the killing karma of a complete killing karma of the other person. Just to really boggle your mind. So, but you get all the other parts about wanting to kill, which are all extreme negativities and, blah, blah, blah.
I wasn't really thinking of a violent suicide, but of euthanasia.
Killing is violent.
Euthanasia.
Well, yes, and that's, you really have to be careful with euthanasia. You have to make sure that the purpose of, like, say, putting your pet to sleep, which means dead. You're killing them, you're making them dead. So let's not mince words here. You really want to make sure you're doing it out of compassion. That is really critical because anytime that kind of mind goes, I can't deal with this sick animal. Like, I don't have time. I don't have the money. I don't have da, 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 da. You want to really work on letting go of that before you take any action. Because then it's all about you. And then that's just killing for your own sake. So you want to, and in this country, we have pretty good relationships with our pets, and we just generally, so it's, we can feel a lot more confident of our compassion, but we want to take good care of our minds and really check up. Am I doing this because it's just hard?
But if you want to do it to stop their suffering.
Yeah. And that's your only thought in your
Wouldn't
mind.
that bring tranquility?
I'm sorry.
So wouldn't that bring tranquility? Like,
To whom?
ending your own pain,
It
the
could
person
be-
killing themselves.
Yes, it's possible. That's why I said it's not necessarily, all negative in the sense that, it depends on their state of mind. And I don't know what their state of mind is. It's still an action of killing. And that's a natural non-virtue. So whatever that means. So, this is the thing, it depends. And since we can't read minds, and since judging others' actions is a big error, there's no point. You don't really know what's going on. And so thinking that you do, we can look at someone's actions and go, I wouldn't do that. And that's a good thing to do, to kind of think about, oh, would I do that? Da, 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 da. Judging other people for their actions, is much more complicated. You might judge and say that action, I'm sorry, it's going to land you in jail. I'm sorry, and for the rest of your life, whatever. We need to make judgments like that. But again, we don't make judgments about the person as if they're just hateful, let's throw them away kind of people, because no one's a throwaway person. They'll all be back.
I have a question on that
Yes.
topic. What of, not of wanting to commit suicide, but what of giving up on the world? Being done with the world, being
Yeah.
tired of everything around.
You're not going to be able to escape it.
Oh,
You'll be
okay.
back. According to Buddhism, you'll just be back. You'll be born in a new body and have to do it all over again. I don't want to be a teenager ever again, but I'm probably going to have to,
You're lucky enough to have a human rebirth.
if I'm lucky enough to have a human rebirth. But the point is, you can't escape samsara that way.
I'm not talking about escaping. I'm saying a person that's just tired of the world, tired of life.
So what's your
tired, but
question?
Doesn't believe in going to suicide. Tired, giving up on the world, done with it, been there, done that,
And you'll do it again,
and then nothing's working.
and you'll do it again.
That's the belief, just coming back again.
Yeah, the consciousness never ceases. It never started, it never ceases. It's always existed. Your consciousness, my consciousness, everybody's consciousness in this room. We just don't remember our past lives until we develop a much greater, stronger mind. So it's just that, again, judging someone else who decides to do that, there's no purpose in that. But, it's like, if you want to hear the Buddhist teachings on that, it's not going to help. And you could end up in a far worse situation. Because if you have given up on everybody, then this is the only group we've got, So if, that's just sort of saying, and so you're gonna, your opinion of other sentient beings matters. And if all we've done is failed in cultivating a sense, now we may just not, whatever, we want to keep trying to cultivate affection. And this is a challenge.
Compassion.
And compassion for ourselves as well, But I mean, there's no point. I mean, we can get bogged down in this forever, The purpose of living a meaningful life is to have a meaningful life.
That could be, what you're describing, could be the first step of renunciation. Part of renunciation, you turn it into a positive. If you're
It could be,
tired of samsara,
then you want to get out of samsara, and there's a different way to get out. And that's developing wisdom and bodhicitta.
Definitely ask you more afterwards.
Yeah. But I mean, the point is, giving up is not going to save you from samsara.
I don't know if that's the right.
well, whatever.
I don't know if giving up was the right wording.
Well, it doesn't matter. No matter how it is, when you die, you go on.
So I died.
Okay, whatever. So, but the point is that we can stop the effort, but we can't change the effects of that. Stopping the effort means what? Are you creating just neutral karma?
The effort would be stagnation.
You wouldn't be helping anybody.
Yeah.
An action, right, in my mind state, saying I don't want to help anyone.
Yeah. You know, so, and I don't want to get any wiser, and I don't want to get any kinder, and don't gonna get any more generous. I don't want to do anything, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's a very self-oriented mind, you know. So,
Throwing the limited time away.
it's throwing that limited time away. So, you know, so all of these things, you know, like I said, we can't really judge the people who make whatever their actions. We can't, you know, we can't judge each other's until we can read each other's minds and know our whole histories and you know. But we can say what is useful for creating the causes and conditions and the effects of a better life, you know, and how to get out of samsara altogether.
The compassionate part of Buddhism, and some people in this country have the habit of having a taxidermist put their pet horse and put that in the living room, or their relatives in an urn, they keep that in place of honor.
Yeah.
It's,
Ancestral worship's really common. You know, it's a spiritual practice in Vietnam and places like that. So, you know, but yeah, but we also have attachment, right? Oh, so that gets us to, you know, all right. So, all right, I don't really want karma is all very fascinating stuff, except unless you're a Buddha, you can't possibly know. So it's actually kind of a waste of time to try to pinpoint exactly what created the cause for this or that. Basically, the Buddha said, actions that lead to suffering are non-virtuous. Notice how that's the reverse of what we, so what are those? So the Buddha said what he observed was that when beings did this or that, the results way down the road are positive or negative. And he determined that positive actions are those that make us feel positive, that are, you know, ones that we like. And negative ones are the ones that increase our suffering. And so killing is one of the ones that, you know, is a negative action. Stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, harsh speech, idle speech, where you're just wasting people's time.
Bullying. Bullying.
Bullying, that's harsh speech,
Divisive.
divisive speech. And then what are the other three? The three of mind, covetousness, you know, craving something that belongs to someone else, and then actually, you know, you set up a plan to take it. Yeah, so sometimes it's malice and wrong view, sometimes it's hatred and wrong view, but it's an intense form of anger or hatred. And then wrong view, and wrong views about reality, how things actually exist. And that's sort of the root of all of our stuff. But there are 5 wrong views in particular, like thinking that your religious practice is supreme and doing things, you know, like making sacrifices on the altar, you know, for spiritual gain, you know, that's a wrong view.
Well, just like when you turn on certain news channels and read certain news websites, they'll sort of give you the implication that it's okay to bully like these sorts of people because those sorts of people are out to get you.
Yeah. Social media is terrible at, right, you know, in the ways you really have to be very choosy about what you listen to. And as soon as you realize, oh, this isn't good for my mind, turn it off, you know, because these are samsaric beings and they will lead us in the wrong direction if we choose poorly. you know? So avoiding bad friends is one of the things. And that's, you know, you look at it that way. It's just like, you know, it's not healthy. Thinking that we can change other people's minds. How good are you at changing your own mind? You know, it's not, you know, so we have to really consider where to put our effort. You know. Boy, sometimes you have a very serious face. Well, I'm glad. And you well ought to. So so the first points of the first point, because there really are only 7 points, the preliminary practices are things like setting up your altar, then sitting down to decide to reflect on these things. You think about death and impermanence, then you think about the laws of cause and effect, that positive actions lead to positive results, that negative actions lead to negative results, that if we look around at the world, cause and effect seems to be pretty infallible. It's, you know, it's what it, you know, and all the causes and conditions have to be there, and there are tons. You know, like it's not just enough to plant a seed. You have to have water, you have to have sun, you have to have the right kind of soil, you have to have nutrients in the soil, blah, 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 blah. You also have to have the karma to have it grow. So, you know, but it's, so we want to understand that our actions of body, speech, and mind matter. And who do they matter to? Us, our experience, because what we experience is the result of actions we have done. You know?
But we can change our karma.
We can
Right.
change our actions of body, speech, and mind. We can't change actions we've already done.
No, but if those past actions have produced negative karma now, we can.
Not
change-
negative karma, negative results. Karma is the action or the law of cause and effect. You know, so it's, you know, so we are experiencing the results of past action. So we can't do really anything about seeds that have already ripened and are producing effects. Okay. We can try to purify past actions so that they can't produce effects. But our main strategy is to work on what we're doing now, so we're not creating the cause for those kinds of effects anymore. And the more we have that habit, the fewer conditions we'll have for those seeds to ripen.
So this morning, by mistake, I didn't mean to do it. It was a little brown spot, and I was gonna clean it up. It was a moth,
Okay.
and I felt so bad afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean, so how you feel afterwards
Matters.
matters. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm still thinking about it. I can't believe I killed a moth.
Well, it's just one of those reminders. Oh, I don't want to be so quick to jump to the conclusion. It's like me, I've gotten in the habit of not immediately hitting my body if something itches, because I don't want to kill a mosquito, or I don't want to kill a spider, or I don't want to kill whatever, you know. So now I know, okay, pause, check to see if it's something living and move it out of your way, as opposed to just immediately killing it. So we learn from those things, you know.
So if I intentionally, oh, I'm gonna go out and do all these good things, I'm gonna make sure people know about it because I want good things to come back to me. That's wrong intention, correct?
Yeah, I mean, in general, that would be that's just you're tainting a positive action.
Yeah, yeah.
By attachment to how you're perceived by others.
I've seen that.
Of course, and we've done it. I'm
you
sure
can-
you've done it.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I always get like a weird feeling and.
Yeah, well, that tells us something
Yeah,
too.
is saying no.
You know, so if we know we have that issue, that one of the reasons we do good things is so other people will like us, or because of that we'll get it, da 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 da. You want us to start doing things anonymously, just out of practice.
Yeah.
You know, if you want appreciation, because that's a downfall of, you know, your generosity. You know, it's like, if you know, it's like we've talked about before, you give a Christmas present to someone, they give something back to you and you go, geez, I'm sorry I spent so much money on their gift. You know, it's, you know, that's, you know, yeah, that's not the point. We need to be reminded sometimes, because sometimes we don't act very adult. You know, we just, you know, we get kind of crass in our motivations. So we, you know, we just need to check them out. And preferably we don't give gifts with that motivation. Yeah.
If I catch myself on a situation like that, I try to understand, why am I trying to impress? What is the lacking on myself that I'm looking
Yes.
for at that moment? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that comes as a tool, not a tool, but that comes as a teaching to find out something that is wrong that I need to change.
Well said.
And that's what the advantage of pausing is. Because if you pause, you can, you know, if you just pause and say, why am I doing this? You know, and really seek it out. And then you can correct your motivation. You know,
You do it, but
still do it with a new
different approach.
motivation, you know, from coming at it from a different angle. So we don't give up just because we don't have pure motivations. We know, you know, we just keep doing our best and recognizing when we're not doing so well and try to correct that motivation. Better to give than not to give. Better to give even with a crappy motivation than not to give. You know,
But it's also good to feel good about oneself
That's
when you
what-
do something.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's sort of the overall point. Is these actions make us happy? And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be happy. What's wrong is that we think what will make us happy usually doesn't. Like getting what we want, by having a great reputation, by being, you know, rich and famous, you know, all these, you know, we have all these ideas. That's what the worldly concerns are about, you know, that we think these things will lead us to happiness, and they don't actually, they backfire. You know, but we have to be observant to realize that. And then you reflect on the faults of cyclic existence, which was what you were getting at earlier about renunciation. So one of the things, like if you really want to become enlightened, get out of samsara completely and be able to truly benefit others, because, you know, you need a perfect mind, a perfect wisdom with perfect compassion, all that kind of stuff, universal everything, you know, then you want to not be attached to this life, this kind of life, this samsara, uncontrolled rebirth, death, rebirth, death, rebirth, death. You know, we want to have more say so in our future lives. You know, we need to see the faults of cyclic existence, you know, and in those, that's about the truth of suffering, the truth of the causes of suffering, you know. So after you've investigated a while, and you come to understand that what the Buddha is saying is that we create the cause to be stuck in this cycle. You know, because we're grasping at things existing in a way that they do not. And from that, we have all sorts of distorted views, like getting what I want will make me happy, you know, that kind of stuff.
Being right.
Being right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my personal favorite. Yeah. So, okay, so that's point one, the preliminaries. Point two is the actual practice. Okay, training the conventional awakening mind. What does that mean? For those of you who might know.
Thinking before you speak.
Well, that's a conclusion, but what's a conventional awakening mind? Well, yeah, it's ignorant, but what's conventional?
That which, so I mean, I guess I contrast it with absolute. So conventional
No,
meaning,
ultimate is a better word.
yeah, absolute, yeah. So I guess
Absolute's
we're-
not a good word.
Yeah, so I guess in conventional, we're talking about
Us.
us, yeah, like you have
Now,
words,
you're mine now.
yeah.
A conventional awakening mind are people who are seeking to awaken,
Okay.
but it's just our minds. It's what exists. You know, we hold it to exist in a way it doesn't, but that's not the relevant point here. The relevant point is us now. Okay, training our minds now. You know, not, you know, that's all it is. Okay, not complicated, just, you know, jargon. You know, so the first point of the actual practice is banish the one to blame for everything. Who's the one to blame for everything?
Or existing,
Yeah.
I mean, the self-centered I. That mind that thinks the whole world revolves around them. They are the center of the universe and that everything should be done to cater to them. That is the one to blame. Negative actions are almost always caused by a self-centered attitude. Because we're not getting what we want, or because, because we want to get something that, maybe we, need to do other things to get, whatever, but we take things that are not ours. It's just, when you think about non-virtues like killing and lying, but what is motivated by that? Something's in it for you. And it's distorted your mind to the point where you think that this is really important for me to have happen, for me to be happy. So, I mean, people kill for that reason. Sometimes just to protect themselves from going to jail.
Manipulation.
I'm sorry, manipulation, all about you, getting what you want and just all this kind of thing. So there's not a lot to remember there. So if you want to, zero in on the likely problem, it's probably going to be some form of self-centeredness. You have to find the I in the picture. Where am I hiding here? What is it that I'm hoping to gain from this action? So we can recognize when we're kind of being manipulative. Sometimes it's obvious what we're doing, but a lot of times it's much more subtle than that. And why does it? How do we make it subtle? Through our rationalization. Oh, I'm right doing this. Yeah, there's something in it for me, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is because it'll be good for the kids. So we have to recognize when we're lying to ourselves, because we need to remove our self-interest in order to make sure there's wisdom in whatever we're doing. Yes, and so if it's going to be a benefit to the kids, you want to be able to see, okay, let's weigh these benefits, and take yourself out of the picture. If I had no interest here, what would I think of this idea? And this helps us make better decisions, wiser decisions, less self-centered decisions.
What about forgiveness?
Okay, what about it?
Wouldn't that? Let's see. I'm lost. Keep going. I'll think of it later.
Okay. So when we recognize that, ooh, my self-interest is in here, we don't have to beat ourselves up for it. We don't have to go, ah, what a selfish person I am. Big surprise. And this is what the Buddha said. That's the basis of our problems, is that we really think the world kind of resolves, and we're wrong about that. But it's just from ignorance, because it looks that way. Don't you look like the center of your universe? I mean, physically, we have stereoscopic vision. I mean, so it's not about looking to see how bad we are. That's not the point. The point is becoming self-aware enough to make better choices for our own happiness in the future. So observing ourselves, we need to recognize when we are practicing minds we really don't want to practice, like anger at ourselves or self-loathing, that's of no use. It doesn't help you get better. It keeps you stuck. Guilt is not very effective. We need to recognize when I'm going in the wrong direction. you know, so I need to do this. I need to take myself out of this picture and look at it again. It's very effective with work, I find, because our pride and ego and all sorts of things come into it. And I found it extremely helpful when I first got this teaching, and I was still working an ordinary job, you know, that it was just so helpful for me to take my, you know, to be able to say, okay, where am I in this picture? Because I made a lot, my fear, my anxiety, and my shyness, all these other things didn't play such a part in my actual actions because I spent a lot of time pausing and thinking about, you know, taking myself out of the picture, you know, and it really made a difference. So I found this instruction very helpful. But when it says banish the one to blame for everything, it's that self-centered mind. Because we don't need it. You know, we need to have self-care, we exist, all those kind of things, but we don't need a self-centered mind. You know. So then
Some of our actions are exclusively self-centered when I'm doing something to help him, and I realize I'm gonna get something back from him. However, if it's something's really gonna benefit other people, is it?
what did I say a few minutes ago about generosity?
Yeah.
It's better to give than to not give. Even if you have a bad motivation for giving, it's still better to do. Yes, it's better to help people, even when we have these ulterior motives. What we want to do is recognize that ulterior motive and keep trying to remove it. You know, because there's nothing wrong with wanting to see yourself as a helpful person. If that helps you get there, you know, it's that's fine. You know, it's so we, you know, we want to be careful with our judgments of ourselves because that can distort our view too. So it's, you know, so when you look and you realize, oh, I'm still benefiting this person. I mean, can you just imagine if we all stopped doing things because there was a bit of self-interest in it? Would anything get done? You know, so that's, you know, we have to be realistic here. So, plus, the main purpose of working on our minds and for liberation and all that kind of stuff, the biggest beneficiary of those actions is who? Ourselves. We're going to be the ones. We're creating the cause. We're receiving the effects. Nobody else is, you know. But in the meantime, we're also benefiting others instead of just taking care of ourselves. So the next point is meditating on the great kindness of all sentient beings.
Nothing. Nobody. No. Oh, it's just, yeah.
Good eye. So the I find it very interesting that these are back to back. You know, the first instruction is to banish self-cherishing. The second instruction is meditating on the great kindness of all sentient beings. Why do you think they're back to back?
Well, if I start judging myself, then the others, if I judge them, they're not doing anything wrong either.
Well, I mean, they might be doing something wrong,
Right,
but they're not bad.
Yeah.
But also, it's this recognizing we have a tendency to think, why should I help them? Nobody's helping me. You know?
Compassion.
Well, we're not looking with compassion, but also we're not recognizing how much we depend on each other. You know, we really want to get that all the different ways people participate in society through their jobs, through their skills, through their presence, you know, is benefits us. We wouldn't have clothes to wear without it. We wouldn't have houses to live in. We wouldn't have music on the, whatever that, I can't even go there. I can say albums and CDs and all that stuff, but whatever it is now, floating out in the ether, we wouldn't have any of that, if people didn't participate in creating all of it, and we benefit from that. And not all those people are out there going, I'm whistling while I work. They have days where they hate their job and they show up anyway. They're no different than we are. Good days, bad days, blah, blah, blah. But we are still benefiting from their efforts. And they benefit from ours. But this, just because we don't know who they are, and that not everybody was involved in this outfit, doesn't mean that they're not out there working for us. I mean, this is the thing. And isn't that unbelievable? I just find these kinds of things one of the most amazing aspects of awareness, of just being aware that we wouldn't have most of the food we eat if someone hadn't bothered to figure out how to grow crops. Someone hadn't figured out that you had to save seed potatoes, in order to have potatoes for the future. If someone didn't figure out, how to irrigate crops, and now we're still doing it. We're finding all sorts of new methods to, grow things and blah, blah, blah. These were all someone's effort, thinking about someone's investment in that, in making that happen. Someone figure out distribution of it, and I mean, from the big things to the little things, like I've said, those little red reflectors on people's driveways so you can find their home. Somebody made those. Somebody had the idea of making those. And then, someone invested in that idea to make those. Wow. I mean, it just blows me away. If we just think about, and then you think about how wonderful food tastes these days, all the sauces and all this. Somebody made those up. And it wasn't just one person, it was a lot of people, and it was a lot of taste buds out there tasted and going, that's not quite it, It's just like incredible the amount of effort that goes on.
I don't know if you've watched any History Channel.
It's not my thing.
But it talks about, it has programs on how things are done.
Made.
And it's very interesting.
No, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
If I didn't have to think chronologically to like study history, but because I am interested in that stuff. But it's just, it's so remarkable. Now, not everything we invent works out. We wouldn't have all these plastic islands in the ocean if we, knew what we were doing all the time. But it isn't for lack of effort, it's from lack of knowledge. We learn things. We're very quick to put our products out there, right? And we don't pause enough to think about, okay, have we really thought about what the long term, how this is going to work out? Fortunately, we keep working on things so that we can come up with new ideas.
I agree. It's in the way.
Oh, you think?
Finding ways not make so much plastic. Yeah. Making money.
Making money. But again, we don't want to judge the people because these ideas start much smaller than that. Did you see the show on the guy who invented the gasket, the car gasket? Every car needs gaskets, apparently. He made a lot of money off of that. But that's not how it started. It's very, so we want to recognize that, yes, we mistakes happen. And the one to blame for everything is that self-cherishing mind. But sitting there and holding every individual to account for their self-cherishing mind isn't going to be meditating on the kindness of sentient beings.
Right.
Yeah. Mistakes happen. But in general, you look at the world, we're pretty generous as a species. You can think of little ways like the smiley face was never trademarked. You know, so that person missed an opportunity to make billions. Billions, billions and billions, you know. Do we sit around and rejoice in the fact that he wasn't interested? You know,
What about all the children going to bed hungry every night?
Yes,
we
and
have
whose fault
enough
is
money
that?
In the world, that shouldn't be,
Yeah.
right?
Because we don't do enough to fix it. It's us, it's on us. We make efforts, but we don't follow through.
That be called collective karma.
Okay, so the individual karma of not having enough to eat is that person's karma. That's their individual thing. But we are creating the collective negative karma of not fixing it. You know. So, so that's on us. You have to have resources to be able to help people who don't have any resources. And we do have resources. And it isn't that we are bereft of people trying to help. We have people who try to help. And, it hasn't been enough. So so we can't, samsara is never going to be perfect because samsara is the result of our past actions. And our past actions are governed by self-cherishing and ignorance. So we need to understand that if we keep looking for perfection in samsara, we are going to continually be disappointed because it's the nature of suffering. So we want to get out. We want to help everybody get out. We have to work on our minds to do that. That's the big picture view. In the meantime, we just want to create the cause to have another good rebirth so we can keep working on our minds so that we can keep, making progress. We need a bunch of those. And being thoughtful. We're not talking about huge deeds here. It really is about that pause and then going, oh, I'm going to come at this from a different angle. I'm going to interrupt that self-centered thought and replace it with something different. Because it's there also. Now, because we're a mixture of things. We have all sorts of good qualities, and we kind of poison it with all sorts of, not so great qualities, like our attachment to doing what we want to do. So, but we also, so if you're looking and you go, I can't find a single good reason for me to do this other than I just want it this way, abandon that whole idea. But most of the time you're going to find something in it for someone else as well, that we're not just all about ourselves. I mean, we have our moments. Again, I never want to be a teenager again. So, but it's about becoming self-aware enough, noticing what's going on in our mind, noticing little catches in our body where we go, I'm not comfortable with something, and checking up before we actually do something. So we're not reactive, but we're choosing our responses. And then when you think of people like that don't have enough to eat, using that as an opportunity to generate compassion. Compassion for all those who don't have enough to eat and all those who interfere with their getting something to eat.
But also mindfulness that I'm not wasteful.
Yes, that's the other flip side. Food waste in this country is terrible. Being aware of that and trying to not be part of that. So all of these moments are opportunities for us to just bring self-awareness to something and then self-correct. And so that takes some reflection. So, if you find yourself, when you're dealing with people that you consider difficult, you know, whatever, you just don't like them, or just whatever your attitude is towards them. You want to work particularly hard on looking at what is arising in your mind. What is it that you're actually thinking about these people, and is it true? Do you have any awareness, or is it just that they don't suit you? You know, they're gonna, you know, preference isn't a problem, but our acting on preference is a problem. You know, you know, it's like, so we want to recognize that, oh, look where my mind goes every time I'm in the presence of this person. You know, that's on me. You know, so it's just in trying to work with that, you know, to understand that we're not going to like everybody. Not everybody likes us. You know, that's the way of the world. You know, that's just the way it is. And we don't have to judge ourselves because not everybody likes us. You know, we always should be checking up on our actions and kind of going, if someone criticizes us, we should certainly listen and decide for ourselves whether it's true or not. And if we're in doubt, then we might check up with some friends and say, do I do that? Because that's how we can find out if we need to correct something that we're just kind of oblivious to. You know, but none of this has to happen with harsh self-judgment. It's just kindness. It's kindness to yourself to want to do something differently that's better for yourself. You know, and it's just, and you know, everybody's out there doing the best they can. It's pretty lousy most of the time. And that's just how we are, you know. We're struggling, but we have this habit of feeding what that self-centered mind wants, because we really think that's how to survive. And we need to, you know, and it's not true. And so we have to question that mind. You know, otherwise there wouldn't be people we admire that seem to do things selflessly. We admire them for a reason. And the person that's in the office is always cheerful and is always helpful, and it's, you know, the person you go to when you have something, you just need something right away, you know, we want to become those people. So but instead we spend an awful lot of time rationalizing why we're not, instead of giving pause to thinking, well, maybe there's some happiness in there if I allow it to happen.
And us being happy is the center of our actions frequently. And if we think about what makes us happy and how we make ourselves happy, why can't we share that with other people and help them be happy by growing a garden or riding a bicycle?
If they want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, so it is a matter of just, you know, I think Apollonius even says the purpose of life is to be happy. But we're mistaken about what causes happiness. You know, the way to be happy is to cherish others. You know? Because it's just so obvious sometimes, you know, when you think, if I take myself out of the picture, right away you suffer less. Because you're not worried about you. You know, all those little things about what you want and what you need and what are not present when you take yourself out of the picture. You know, and it's just, you know, so it's so interesting that, you know, grasping ourselves to make sure we're in the center of that picture is self-defeating in terms of satisfaction. Yeah.
In terms of showing kindness to other people, what would be an appropriate response to someone taking that, or you know, reacting negatively to you, or having it as a weakness?
First of all, you have to ask yourself if their opinion's correct, and does it matter? We can't control other people's actions. So we might do something that we think is really kind for someone else, and they may not like it. And we have to accept that and learn from that, going, oh, that doesn't suit them. You know, I thought it would, but it didn't, you know, so we don't have to beat ourselves up for it. They may beat us up for it, but, you know, we don't have to take their words to heart. It's just more like, oh, live and learn. Someone's taking advantage of you, you can stop that. It's not kindness or compassion to let someone create negative karma or towards you. That's not kindness. That's not wisdom. That's not compassion. So you do what you can so they can't take advantage of you. Doesn't mean you have to hate them. Doesn't mean anything. You don't have to ruin their reputation even. It's just all a matter of just kind of walking away from this situation. This is not healthy, you know. So, when they ask, you can say, well, I was feeling kind of taken advantage of, and these are the reasons. And if they go, oh, I wasn't doing that, then you can go, okay, I'm fine. Just keep going. So it's just, it's people's reactions to us, we cannot control. If we feel like our actions are feeding something negative in that person, we want to stop those actions. So none of this is, first of all, none of this is rocket science, but it's also not easy to do. It really is about pausing, taking our own wisdom to the situation, looking at it honestly, recognizing when our agenda is kind of directing the traffic. Consider maybe that's not the way you want to be, and, do something with that. But I find it very helpful. Like this text is very helpful to me because it points out some of the things that we do. Like one of my favorite lines in here is, I don't know where it is, but it says, don't carry a grudge. Or actually, it doesn't say that. It says, don't wait in ambush for someone, where you kind of put in your pocket something about them that, and you use it in the next argument to really hurt them. Ding. I was good at that. But we need to recognize when we do that, that when we've been saving this up, we never did really forgive them. We're still holding on to it, and now we're going to use it. Boom. We need to be able to recognize these things about ourselves, or we don't speak up. When somebody keeps saying something that we find hurtful, we don't let them know. We don't take responsibility for, our own hearts and say, I know you don't know this, but when you say this, I feel hurt. Now, they don't have to change. We can't control them. But sometimes it's helpful to give them information that they don't have. We lots of wounds and people aren't going to be aware of them. So it can be helpful to share them if you're in a relationship. You don't have to tell the world these things, but, Okay. So we will continue on with this topic. We may or may not finish it, but that's okay. I had a lot of things open. Okay. So now we can do what?
Rejoice.
Rejoice. We've all been putting effort, trying to listen, trying to think, trying to, do these different things, that's positive. We don't have to agree on everything to be positive. It's just, we can, we're trying to work with our minds. If everybody tried to work with their minds, things would be better. So this is good news. And that brings good results. Our positive efforts bring positive results. So not wanting to be greedy with them, we practice the mind of generosity, making the wish that these positive efforts result in positive things for others. Okay. So on page 246.
Oh.
May all beings everywhere plagued by sufferings of body and mind obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness, and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. And then for the long life of His Holiness, page 244. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. And then for the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche on page 234, should be pasted in. If it's not there, sorry about that. Fearless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, victorious Losam father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now, holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice. You wore the armor of patience that's never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, to you I make request. While striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and from other living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of Bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. So thanks very much for your participation and your comments and your frowns and whatever else, So let's see. Thursday night, we continue with our, our discussion about everything and beyond on Thursdays. And Sunday the same. Anything coming up?
Our puja will take place on April 12th.
I'm not till April 12th. Okay, yep. So April 12th is Medicine Buddha Puja, which is good for everything. So it's just a prayer practice where we rejoice in the vows of the medicine Buddhas to help us. So
Then I'd just say final last call for the pilgrimage that Venerable Calvin is leading in India and Nepal in October. So it'll be October 10th and November 3rd. There's options to attend, portions of the trip, but we're finalizing the details so that he can find the flights and book accommodations. So we'll send a newsletter update about that. So keep an eye on it if you're interested in partaking in that.
in the recording.
Yeah.